Our audience tonight consists of, I believe, 15 U.S. representatives from 15 U.S. museums, over 25 curators from freelance as well as working for museums, from Oregon to Washington, from Michigan. The state of Ohio, we have 4 museums represented, and up and down the Eastern Seaboard. In addition, we have people here from 6 countries, 4 continents, from Singapore to Germany. And we have docents at a number of museums, as well as dealers, and of course, really some of Bob and Betsy's friends who are likewise passionate about Japanese painting and are collectors themselves. And this is the silver lining of Zoom presentations, is that we can reach a far greater audience, and we can bring this discussion to a multiplicity of individuals who would not be able to travel to Harvard under the best of circumstances. Before introducing our panelists, I would also like to thank Catherine Martin of Schulten Gallery, who is the current chairperson of Asia Week New York. And I would very much appreciate their support of the series of panel discussions. And I, of course, would like to thank my amazing women at Joan Mirviss Limited, who are helping all of these technicalities to work in our favor tonight. Thank you for making this go smoothly. And I say that with knocking on wood at the same time. Now, as for our panelists, we have the next slide, please. Rachel Saunders is responsible for the Japanese collections at the Harvard Art Museums. She also teaches at Harvard University, from where she received her PhD in 2015, specializing in medieval, narrative, and sacred painting. She has recently curated, obviously, Painting Edo, Japanese art from the Feinberg collection, and Prince Shotoku, The Secrets Within. At the Museum of Fine Arts Boston from 2004 to 11, Rachel worked extensively with Japanese early modern rare books. She has held several fellowships and published numerous articles in both English and Japanese. Her current publication, about which we're talking tonight, Painting Edo, she co-authored with Kyo Lippert, another one of our panelists, and she is the editor of the forthcoming catalog Raisonné on the Feinberg collection, which we hope and pray will be due out later this year. Yukio Lippett's research and teaching interests center around Japanese painting of the medieval and early modern eras. He is the professor of the history of art and architecture at Harvard University and faculty director of the arts of the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. His book, Painting of the Realm, The Kano House Painters of 17th Century Japan from 2012, was awarded 2 major prizes. His numerous other books focusing on Edo-era painting include volumes on Sotatsu, Zen figure painting, The Artist in Edo, and Ito Jakshu. He is the co-author of the new publication that I just mentioned. Sebastian Nizard has for over 40 years experience as an auction house specialist, appraiser, and dealer in Japanese and Korean art. He received his PhD in 1980 from London University, focusing on the works of Utagawa Kunisada. Between 1980 and 97, he headed the Japanese and Korean department at Christie's before establishing his own business, Sebastian Nizard LLC. He has cataloged numerous important single-owner auction catalogs and authored and collaborated on 3 major shows of ukiyo-e, organized by the Ukiyo-e Society of America, now the Japanese Art Society of America, which were held at Japan Society and Asia Society. He has advised and helped numerous American collectors to assemble major collections of Japanese works of art. And last but not least, but certainly most importantly, the Feinbergs. Bob Feinberg graduated from Harvard College, majoring in chemistry, receiving his doctorate in organic chemistry from Queen's College of Oxford University. After research positions at Johns Hopkins University and Rockefeller University, he joined the family business, Duron Inc., a regional maker of architectural paints and coatings, rising to the position of CEO and then president, before he sold the business in 2005. He has served on the boards of both the Freer Gallery of Art at Arthur M. Sackler Gallery and the Walters Art Museum, in addition to that of the National Symphony Orchestra and Washington Performing Arts. Betsy Feinberg received her BA from Connecticut College and her master's from Hunter College, New York. She is a retired consultant and teacher of children with visual impairment, a longtime advocate at the local and state level for people with vision loss. She volunteers her time and sits on the board of the Aid Association for the Blind of the District of Columbia, the advisory board of the Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind, and the President's Leadership Council at Connecticut College. She and Bob have been avid collectors of Japanese art for over 4 decades, acquiring masterworks on countless trips to Japan, as well through prominent Western dealers. Their unrivaled collection includes nearly 500 Japanese paintings, screens, contemporary Japanese ceramics, and Buddhist sculpture. Next slide. On a personal note, and I have to make this personal, Bob and Betsy were initially introduced to me more than 30 years ago by Betsy's sister, Amy. You see, I'm very bad. Then a curator at the Brooklyn Museum. Bob and Betsy came to my home gallery expressing their recent interest in acquiring fine Edo-era Japanese painting and contemporary Japanese ceramics. Little did I suspect in those early years how close we would become as friends. In so many ways, I have been a witness in the evolution in their taste and insight through their decades of travel to Japan and to exhibition and symposia around the world that brought them a real depth of knowledge in this very complicated field, as you will soon learn. As interest in Japanese Edo period expanded, they went everywhere, including Manhattan, in their search of works to both study and acquire. In Bob Feinberg's own words, he says, "We were presented with a wealth of choices, painting as varied as they were beautiful. We were entranced." Now masterworks from their collection are in constant demand for exhibitions, loans, publications by museums, both in Japan and the West, and have been very widely published. In my experience, and 43 years of experience, few collectors in any media that I handle as a dealer of Japanese art have been as serious students, nor as passionate about personally selecting the best from the best on their global hunt. On an even more personal basis, the Feinbergs have become dear friends to both myself and my husband, Bob, especially as we share a profound love of Japan and France, where we all hope to return sometime soon. It is a very important friendship for us and one which is especially meaningful for us tonight. Thank you both, Bob and Betsy, for giving everyone the opportunity to be inspired by your story and by your generosity. Okay, so now we will get started with the questions. If we can go, the first question is actually to Rachel. Rachel, can you tell us a little bit about the museum and the depth and range of its holdings in Asian art?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. The Harvard Art Museums is the collective umbrella that brings together 3 museums, in fact, at Harvard University. These are the Fogg Museum, the Bush Reisinger Museum, and the Arthur M. Sackler Museum. And together, the collections number more than 250,000 objects in all media. The museums are integral to the university and they serve as resources for students, scholars, and the public. And you need the next slide. Great. The oldest of the museums is the Fogg Museum, which was founded in 1895. And by the 19-teens and 20s, the museum really became conceived of as a laboratory for the arts, with the emphasis on intimate study of original works of art, as well as the investigation of materials and conservation science. The core tenets of encounter with original works of art and the education research mission of the museum have been characteristic in its evolving iterations since then. East Asian art was fortunately an early interest at the museum, and today the museums house approximately 20,000 East Asian objects. Of these, around 9,000 are Japanese objects, and almost 5,000 of those are woodblock prints, including almost 1,000 Surimono prints. And occasionally, here's one of my favorite Surimono from the collection. Occasionally, we get to install those woodblock prints in our European galleries too. The collections also include a large number of Buddhist sutras and secular manuscripts, such as this one, the early 16th century Genji album, which was gifted to the museums by the bibliophile Philip Hofer. The sculpture collection is relatively small in size, totaling about 100 objects, but it does include some remarkable highlights, including our Prince Shotoku Age 2 sculpture shown here. But more recently, we've been focusing our acquisitions on the modern and contemporary eras. As you may know, in 2014, the Harvard Art Museums reopened after a thorough renovation that brought the three constituent museums under one physical and organizational roof. And this renovation, which preserved the historic exterior, expanded our gallery space by about 40%. And it was designed to open up the museums both conceptually and physically as a modern laboratory for the arts. And out of that, we gained wonderful improved facilities, especially for the Strauss Center for Conservation, which is on the top floor of the building. And this is also where the Forbes Pigment Collection, which is a conservation pigment reference library, is housed. But really, for me, the revolutionary heart of this new building is our Art Study Center, which is a suite of 5 classroom spaces of varying sizes. This is situated on the 4th floor of the building, and here museum staff and faculty teach classes with original objects, and students and members of the public can make appointments to come and view works of art in person here, although of course that service is currently temporarily suspended. But it's been one of the most impactful parts of that renovation, and in the academic year 2018 to 2019, for example, over 34,000 objects were viewed in the Art Study Center by a total of over 8,000 visitors. And of those 34,000 objects, 7,779 were from the Asian collections.
Oh, that's great. Rachel, since we are now getting into the world of Asia, can you tell us how the Feinberg collection fits in with the framework of the existing collection, both Asian and Western? And how do you anticipate using the collection in the years ahead, once we reopen, within the museum to inspire students and faculty and the general public as well?
Great question. Thank you, Joan. If we can move to the next slide, perfect. The Feinberg collection is really a vital complement to our current holdings. And as we know, Betsy and Bob have collected predominantly early modern Edo period paintings, so 17th through 19th centuries mostly. Our permanent collections at the museums have unusual strength in medieval and late medieval materials, but we haven't historically been strong in Edo painting. So this promised gift of such a comprehensive and beautifully preserved collection of Edo paintings has brought us a giant step forward to being able to teach a comprehensive history of Japanese art through original objects. In terms of ways we plan to use the collections, well, the collection has already been in full action in the galleries and in teaching. Since 2014, we've been installing paintings from the Feinberg collection in themed rotations in our East Asian Painting Gallery. These rotations have been happening twice a year, and they represent not only a great opportunity to enjoy the paintings, but also from the teaching point of view, a wonderful chance for our graduate student interns and our postdoctoral fellows in particular to gain some experience of what it actually takes to plan and execute a small-scale exhibition. These installations are also used by our undergraduate student guides in the Ho Family Student Guide program. And these student guides offer general tours of the museums which are aimed at the public. And then of course, in February this year, we opened the special exhibition Painting Edo, Japanese Art from the Feinberg Collection, which includes more than 120 works and is the largest special exhibition that we've ever installed at the museums. And I'll say a little bit more about that later.
Thank you, Rachel. You're tempting us. I'm sure everyone can't wait to see more. I'd like to address the next question to Bob and Betsy. What is the passion that drives your collecting? What has been the most significant benefit that you would say that has come from this single-minded endeavor over these 4 decades?
Before we answer the question, Joan, we just wanted to take this moment to thank you for organizing this presentation on Zoom for so many people. The Harvard Museum's Painting Edo Japanese art from the Painting Edo Japanese art from the Feinberg collection. We wanted to thank you for your friendship for over many, many years, as you mentioned a little bit earlier. We also wanted to thank Martha Tedeschi, director, Yukio Lippett, and Rachel Saunders for mounting the exhibition at the Harvard Art Museums. And we wanted to reach out to all our friends, family, scholars, and curators and dealers, all of whom have helped us to make collecting so very, very enjoyable and a pleasure for well over 40 years. We're thrilled that you, Joan, invited us to participate, and we hope to be able to provide a brief view of ourselves as collectors.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bob. Betsy, it's great.
Well,
Please, now I'd love to hear your answer.
leap into answering your question, Joan. You know, I think the passion that really built our collection was the excitement of discovery. Remember, our interest in Japanese art started completely by chance, almost 50 years ago, when we found a $2 poster of a Portuguese ship arriving in Nagasaki Harbor at the end of the 16th century. To the Japanese, that event was momentous enough, obviously, to memorialize on a full-size folding screen, which was extraordinarily costly in its time and much too large for any but the top ranks of Japanese society to display. The Japanese were clearly astonished. Let's go on to the next slide if we could. The Japanese were clearly astonished by the strange-looking sailors on its deck, sporting florid mustaches under rather prominent noses and wearing ridiculous balloon pantaloons and stovepipe hats. Their painted images intrigued us too, raising historical questions we didn't have any answers to. Like, when did the Europeans first discover Japan? Why were the Portuguese the first to begin trading there? And what was their impact on Japanese culture? Answering those questions led us to a veritable cascade of discovery as we began poking around in books on Japanese history and art. Everything about Japanese painting was so amazingly different from the Western art that we knew, but the broad range of styles and highly varied subjects of Edo period painting gave us an intriguing window into a culture we knew very little about, and we liked what we saw.
To help get us started, Amy Poster, my sister, introduced us to Matthias Komor, who was an elegant Manhattan dealer of Japanese art, from whom we made our very first and very small purchase, a small fan painting by Tani Buncho, and it was in very poor condition. That was our first hesitant step into the 50-year-long arc of discovery to which our hunt for interesting paintings has led us.
Along the way, we learned some really interesting things about Japanese painting. For instance, why Edo period aesthetics had changed so radically from earlier times, now reflecting the interests and tastes of the broader population, rather than just the imperial and shogunal hierarchies. We discovered the cultural currents that influenced those tastes and how so many different styles of Edo period painting evolved. And we became familiar with the artists who created them. Over a lot of time, looking at thousands of photos and actual paintings, we learned to tell really great works from merely good ones. Learning as we went along made the hunt for paintings an increasingly exciting adventure. So I think we can truthfully say that it was the excitement of gradual discovery of a remarkable culture and an artistic aesthetic new to us that energized our quest for great works of art. Maybe maybe that's just another way of saying that we love what we were doing.
That's wonderful.
To-
Thank you.
To answer your other question,
Oh,
one
okay.
of the obvious benefits of collecting beautiful Japanese things was being introduced to the many pleasures of life in a fascinating country so different from our own. But an even more profound benefit, realized only after we'd made multiple trips to Japan, was coming to understand and feel for ourselves the Japanese cultural sensitivity to nature and its changing seasons, which is so beautifully expressed in so many of our paintings in the collection. That opening of our eyes has changed the way we look at and experience the real natural world in which we live.
Next.
Beautifully stated.
Yes, the way we live here at home has also been strongly influenced by our collecting. We live with paintings on our walls in our home, changing them as the seasons change, or for groups of visiting students, as you see here, and sometimes just for friends who are coming to dinner. Our collection of contemporary ceramics, which you probably see in the background of this presentation, allows me to make flower arrangements that complement the paintings. Collecting has added a level of appreciation and pleasure to our lives that we never would have realized had we not discovered the richness and beauty of Japanese art.
Thank you, Betsy.